Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in. Today, we are speaking with Lydia Pilcher. She's a film and television producer, writer, director, and founder of Cine Mosaic, a leading production company with a wide range of business partners in the US, Europe, India, Turkey, Africa, and the Middle East.
And Pilcher's a two-time Emmy Award winner and Academy Award nominee for Cutie and the Boxer, and a Golden Globe nominee for three HBO films, Iron Jawed Angels, Normal, and You Don't Know Jack. She's also the founder of the PGA Women's Impact Network and co-founder of PGA Green, which promotes sustainable production practices. She also co-chairs the Directors Guild of America Sustainable Future Committee and co-leads the Writers Guild of America and Producers Guild Climate Storytelling Working Group.
And hello, if that's not enough, in 2024, Pilcher will teach an interdisciplinary graduate level course she designed for Columbia University's Climate School and School of the Arts called Climate Change, Storytelling, Arts, Zeitgeist, and Our Future. Amazing.
Mhm.
I've known her for a long time. She was an early inspiration for me in this work of sustainability in the entertainment industry. And as we've just heard, just a true powerhouse producer, writer, and director. So, Mark, I'm excited to introduce you to her and have this conversation.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm excited to speak to her. And she's one of the original badass movers and shakers in sustainable production world. And yeah, I look forward to diving in. And I'm sure it'll be a fun, dynamic, and really informative conversation.
Let's go. Yay, we're here with Lydia. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you
We're
so much.
doing this podcast to elevate the voices of the people doing amazing work behind the scenes. And you're a powerhouse, and you always come to mind when I'm thinking about sustainable production and sustainability just broadly in the industry. So super excited to hear your thoughts and your journey and what you're working on in this whole like industry sustainability evolution. So welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just tell us how you got started in the industry, kind of like how you started thinking about just sustainability in the industry. I know you've been doing it for a really long time or thinking about it for a really long time. How did this all come to be for you?
Yeah. As you probably know, I've been making movies for about 3 decades now,
Yeah.
and I have always been an independent filmmaker, but I work um, in Hollywood, outside of Hollywood, and with Hollywood. So I really, it was around 2004. I was a young mother, and was really starting to sort of have this feeling as I was raising these young children that, you know, we're not really sort of separate from the earth and the planet and the world. We're not really here to control it and dominate it. We're really a part of the natural world as human beings. And that feeling that was coming over the transom as I'm experiencing motherhood and having birthed these children was really, really strong. And around, not long after that, I saw Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. And that really was a big wake-up call to me. And I was an officer in the Producers Guild at that time and met Al Gore, and he was really looking for industries and across America to really look inside their institutions and answer the question, can you do more?
Mhm.
And so that was when we formed the first PGA Green Committee, and we were the Al Gore team helped us secure a grant from the Alliance for Climate Protection to calculate the carbon footprint of a production. And so that was the first step. And some colleagues and myself, Mary Jo Winkler and Katie Carpenter and I, we started, we were practicing sustainability on our sets, just kind of ad hoc, putting this committee together loosely. And the studios noticed our efforts and asked us to collaborate on the Green Production Guide, which, became, it was like a 15-year endeavor of a partnership. And over the years, we really messaged sustainability. It was hard in the beginning to get people to take it seriously. But what we have seen being in this for such a long haul is that as the climate crisis intensifies, the concern from crew people is measurably increasing. And it's significant because what I realize now, and we spend a lot of time now that we're very focused on fossil fuels and talking about the health dangers of that with diesel generators on our sets. You realize that the cast and the crew are a human resource, and we spend our time on sets. We travel, we set up our little units and base camps and shoots wherever we go, and we're moving around in caravans, and we're out there in the elements. We're out there in the heat and the cold and the rain, and we are, experiencing all of this. And I don't, the people and the rest of the people in Hollywood who work in offices and sit inside don't really recognize the human element of people working on set. If they did, we would not be inhaling diesel on our sets every day. So I think it's an issue, but it's something that we're all kind of coming around now together to organize with. And in terms of production, once the studios finally had, all of this carbon calculation had happened, and they released a report that, showed us the percentage of fuel and power that occupies the carbon footprint of any production, whether it's an independent film or an episode of television or a big tentpole film. It's at least 50%, if not more.
Mhm.
And that's when we realized that we've got to go all the way on clean energy, and really this is the only way that we're going to get out of it. And we know that in the world at large, that's the same situation. So yeah, and we, in 2015, I think I was in Paris. Zena, you were in Paris
Yeah.
with the higher education team.
Yeah.
I was there actually representing the studios. Um,
Amazing.
well, my background is an international filmmaker, and I go to all the international film festivals, and it's a world that I love. But it was the first time I had been there on a climate basis, and I met all of these, climate filmmakers and people that, are still friends today, and we still work through the UN and different other, avenues to collaborate. But back then we had basically wanted to put forth a paper. 197 nations at the Paris Accords came together to make this agreement, and we felt hopeful. We
Yeah.
just felt so hopeful that we've got this now.
Yeah.
And then of course, we came home and we continued our work, and then X number of years go by, and the global warming isn't, it's rising, it's rising, it's rising. Then we get to 2018, and the UN is saying, no, you are, we're in trouble. We're in real trouble. And then I felt like another wave of it last year when, it looks like the 1.5 was virtually, it's impossible now. We're now they're just arguing about when to call it, but
Almost
we know
comedic
that the
of how
average
laughable it
temperature
is.
last year, I think globally, was at 1.64. And we keep seeing the messages of it's the hottest month. It's the
Yeah.
hottest month. The next month's the hottest month, the hottest year. Now 2024 is on track to be the hottest year. And so it's a desperate situation, and we have to really acknowledge it. I always start my anything where I'm talking to just remind ourselves of that, because it creates anxiety, but the solution is to lean into it and
Yeah.
not to withdraw.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with that kind of premise then in mind, Lydia, like how, I mean, you are a leader on production, right? And in this whole space, how do you approach your projects? Like, what are you thinking? Are you talking about this immediately when you approach your projects? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you have to do it right out of the gate. I mean, it is something that you want to communicate to all the people, as a production starts with a few people and then people come on and it grows into a big organism. So you have to start right at the beginning. It's really important to have the director on board. And Mary Jo and Katie and I have found that over the years that we just have to have that conversation right up front, and we need that buy-in right up front. Um, and I think that you want to set achievable goals on a production. Every production is unique.
Hmm.
Whether you're on location, you're on stage, you're in this, state, that state, you're traveling or not. You have to look at the specifics of that production and then say, what are the goals that we could set and make sure that there is a clear path to achieving them, and then work hard to do that.
Yeah.
And measuring so that you can reduce is important. It's not that hard to do. I've never had an accountant say that they couldn't figure out the carbon calculator. It's pretty straightforward, and they're
Yeah.
tagging anyway as they enter costs into a cost report. They're tagging, so it's just it's not that difficult. And I think now the studios are moving more and more deeper into carbon calculation, and all of that tagging is super important. Assets tagging, what happens with them at the end of a show, super
Hmm.
important. I mean, I think we're all aware, and I hear them talk a lot about the impending regulations that are, you know, imminent. It's not
Yeah.
a question of if, it's just when, and probably soon. So I think it's a it's an interesting time. I realize that in the sort of individualism of America, the culture that our country was founded on, that this hierarchy of a film set and studios and all of it is just it's just intrinsically a part of that mindset. And we've been doing a lot of messaging and sustainability to counter that, because we feel that we're stronger when we work together, and we're stronger when we understand what each other's jobs are. Not that we're doing everybody's jobs. If you can understand what they are and where their sustainability pain points are, we can work together to solve them. So I
Right.
think this kind of messaging is important. And it's really just been in the last 5 or 6 years that I would say almost every guild and union has formed a green committee or sustainability committee, and they're strong, and it's educated we've educated ourselves on what everybody's needs and strengths are in terms of coming up with solutions. So whether it's the Art Directors Guild, going deep into materials and toxins and alternatives that we all really have wanted forever, but never actually really explored the depth of the problem, and now the innovation of the solutions that are really coming at us quickly. But we have to understand them, try them, give ourselves the feedback, share knowledge. So all of that is really important. And yeah, I think so. When you're starting a show, you want to get the buy-in. And my favorite quote for years was Obama's quote when he said, "We're the first generation to really see the evidence of the climate change crisis, and we're the last generation that can do anything about it." And that was the first sentence I lead with in a production meeting,
Yeah.
of every production. And you just hear people lean forward, because it's sobering. It's very
Yeah.
sobering.
It's
And
like,
and a
what can I
film can't do
do?
it. Yeah, and if film
Yeah.
can't do it, we're really screwed. There's a quick question on that. There's the behind the camera stuff going on, but there's also the storytelling and the stuff in front of the camera. You mentioned in 2015 you're in Paris with the sort of the climate filmmakers and so on. Does that line, is that a hard line, or is that a blurred line now as we start to get both sides of the camera speaking to each other and telling stories?
Well, it's interesting because I think that while climate has been a conversation sort of in the public consciousness for like between 30 and 35, 40 years, the scientists have known a lot longer, right? The public caught up to it. It's only been since 2020 that Hollywood has caught up to the climate conversation. And it's not to say that movies didn't happen. We know that like in 2004, this blockbuster movie, A Day After Tomorrow, was made, and it had got some dings for dubious science, but it also did send people online and looking for more information about extreme weather events. And it is to this day the only big catastrophe movie from Hollywood that associates the catastrophe with the greenhouse effect. We
Really?
It's the only one, and yeah, and not even that movie about the tornado that came out this summer did it. So I think it's important to, it's important to sort of think about why is that, right?
Uh-huh.
And I have a production company, Cinemosaic, in New York, and we make independent films. And there was a point, probably around, what was before the 2018. It was sort of there was a point where I was just like, why can I'm making movies? I need to marry my passion about the environment with my passion for storytelling, and I need to find those climate movies and tell them. And I developed them nonstop and could not get arrested. It was really interesting, and I know from being active in Hollywood through the gender equality and the DEI movements, how those tropes can get stuck in the craw of the executive suite, and it takes Hollywood a big time to turn the ship around anyway.
Yeah.
It's not so easy. So I began to think more and more about it, and finally I made one film outside of the system, Radium Girls, which we financed with equity. It was starring Joey King, and Netflix did end up acquiring it later, but
Love it, Lydia. Love, love, love it.
I learned a lot, you
Yeah.
know, in the process of making that film. I learned even more when I released it because
Oh,
we were at the Tribeca Film Festival. We invited Elizabeth Sutherland, who was the former head of EPA Water Department, and she had recently left because she felt she would be more valuable outside of the EPA than inside. They were starting to track all of the um, pieces of policy and legislation that were being, rolled back by the Trump administration. But she said to us, Lydia, the EPA uses the Radium Girls case all the time. I mean, I won't go into the story, but it's girls painting the glow in the dark watch dials in Orange, New Jersey, lip pointing, being poisoned, the company diagnosing them with syphilis. The New Jersey Consumers League convinces them to exhume a sister that had died from syphilis, and they had her, the New Jersey Consumers League got involved, and she had died of radium poisoning. So this was the first example of where the corporation knew they were being, poisoned by radium, covered up the science, denied the science, and just continued to roll out these huge profits that were happening with radium at the time. So it was interesting to hear that the EPA was still using it. And she said, they wrote the playbook, for big tobacco. And now big tobacco wrote the playbook for the oil and gas industry. And
right.
that was, that was something that yeah, that sounds about right, and then comes 2022 and the congressional investigations with all these, treasure troves of fossil fuel communications saying that they did know,
Yeah.
about the dangers, and how they, and what the measures needed to be taken on their part to make people feel like either it wasn't real or there wasn't anything that they could do about it and everything was going to be fine, don't worry. And you begin to realize why it's not on our screens. So that also made it unsurprising when the USC study revealed this statistic back in 2020 about less than 3% of film content, using a number, like they had like 36 climate related words, just not there. It was like tantamount to a climate silence. I was part of a group that organized, some climate storytelling organizations in the industry. We just wanted to see who was out there, who's talking about it. We had formed a interguild working group, with the Writers Guild and the Producers Guild for climate storytelling. We had one with all the other unions and guilds for clean energy. And these were very productive groups of people coming together in a very solutions oriented way. But when we put all of these groups together, and they were research entities, the studios were listening, the unions and guilds were involved, and um, what we realized is we could sort of see the landscape of where the gaps were in different arenas. And we were aware that Europe was kind of very much ahead of where we were with storytelling. All the British broadcasters had signed a climate pledge. People were really working to implement systems into their companies to try to embed more climate consciousness, in the storytelling, and not to avoid it. Again, just to embrace it and make it, this is the world we live in. And one of the things that I felt was missing was that I didn't see a pipeline for climate storytellers. And I sort of checked in with the Green Film Schools Alliance, and there's 40 film schools, and anybody teaching climate storytelling? No, it was all production sustainability.
Yeah.
So that
And
was
even
a
that's limited.
concern. What?
And even that's limited.
Yeah. Although I was pleased to hear that one of the schools was requiring every student film to have a position of eco steward last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Um, and they have to do training in order to, serve that position. So that was good too. On the storytelling front, I had taught cultural strategy at NYU at the film school, and that also was born out of my work around gender equality and the DEI movement, and a program that I had developed called Culture Shift, and it was about audience, and the seminar was the audience is in revolt. So I had done that, and when the pandemic happened, I felt like, oh, well, we moved the needle a little bit, and I think it's that conversation is widely out there now, and I didn't think I would teach anymore. But when this gap came up, I was like, no, there's a problem, because it's not, everybody's tiptoeing around this, and they're like, oh, we need to just make sure it's mentioned in a film, and we need to, like, put a solar panel on a roof. And I'm happy for people to be doing that. I mean, it's not that that shouldn't happen, but we are missing the bigger climate stories in Hollywood. And there is no pipeline to get them made. And it's clear that the studios are not developing those stories. So we have, they're looking now to filmmakers. The filmmakers need to bring us the stories. Fair enough. but we have to cultivate that talent. So you have a
Yeah, so
question.
just I'm curious because just when you were making Radium Girls, did you find any, like, because in this vein of what you're talking about, did you find it difficult to make it, develop it, make it, pitch it, like all of that? Like, or because of the story itself, like was it controversial? Like was any of
It's
that?
interesting, because even if you think about it, it's a story about these teenage girls getting poisoned. Yes, they stand up and they sue the corporation, but they die. So it's kind of like, okay, like, how's that going to make people feel good? And what I loved about the story is that the heart of it were these teenage girls who had big dreams, and it was an exciting time. It was, there was a lot happening in the world, and New York was right across the river from New Jersey, and I I loved the way they thought about it. But then I found out something else, which was that the way they really succeeded in that lawsuit against the radium company was the early women's movement, because women had just gotten the right to vote and they wanted to use it. It was Jane Addams and Hull House, and there were these other women who were really looking at the industrialization coming forward with no regulation,
Hmm.
no child labor, anything, forget women. And it was they saw that these girls in the radium factory were actually going to sue this corporation, and they got involved. And it's a beautiful story of how this sort of collective action comes together to make something happen. I mean, I honestly believe, that nobody would know who the Radium Girls were today had that collaboration not happened. And not only, there was like the first, one of the first women scientists at Harvard who had done the research for the radium company and was under an NDA. And the powerful women in the women's movement went and said, how can you sleep at night with these girls dying? And so when the court case came, she broke her NDA and she testified. And
I literally have chills right now, Lydia, because I loved it so much. I was like, I was like,
but it took a while of developing. I mean, we developed it for 5 years, and it was that process of like you do more research and you do more research and you start, and these are real life people that some of them, we know from our women's history and we've heard of, but yet the lens had never sort of captured it all in one go. And so um, that's the thing that I love about the story, because, all these things happened afterward, like OSHA, and all these different things happened around toxics. And the Radium Girls, they don't know that it happened. I mean,
yeah,
how many times in a day, Zena, do you think like, am I nuts putting all this energy into this? Is it really going to amount to anything? It will, but we
yeah,
might not know it.
yeah,
It'll happen in the next generations. And that it's kind of the beauty of what we do. And it's the beauty of tipping points, really, right? That it's a very small percentage of buy-in and consensus that can create change.
yeah,
So it's not, I mean, we're unusual people that we spend as much time that we do on these things that we care about, but I think it does make a difference. And I think the Radium Girls really proved, I hope they're up there feeling happy about,
yeah,
the fact that what they did, the action that they took did make a difference.
yeah, yeah. And it took the story, it took the film to bring this, to mind, in the, current culture as
Well, it's
well.
also for young girls, because there's a Radium Girls play, and it has been for the last 6 or 7 years, it's been in the top 10 NPR listed high school plays that are performed. It's young girls love this play. And even when we were in post and it was the pandemic, they were performing them virtually, and they had heard about the film, so they were inviting us to their virtual performances. But
Oh, wow.
again, it sort of speaks to this idea of what is, I think the teen girls love that it's teen girl, they're doing something together. They're making
Yeah,
something happen together. It's this collective action, and it's empowering.
yeah, yeah.
So
So,
are you? Yeah. Sorry. I just want to ask one more question.
yeah,
So
go.
then, so then, does this mean that you're working on a climate focused production or a story
A new
similar
one?
to? Yeah.
Oh, well, I did make a multi-screen installation that's a climate film based on a short story from a anthology called Octavia's Brood. They're science fiction stories from social justice movements. And I was interested in experimenting with the more of an immersive form. And it has been quite interesting in that having multiple screens, having being able to sort of keep nature very present in the story allows people to sort of take on the catastrophe and the things that they're worried about, but not feel like they've lost nature completely. So it creates a very emotional experience, and that's a form that I had never attempted before, but I'm very drawn to. Um, yeah, I have other films in development that are climate related, I'm interested in supporting, bigger films that could reach a wider public. Because I think people want to learn, climate is complex.
Yeah.
It's multifaceted and it's complex, and we all want to learn more. And that's one of the things. So I'm teaching. I designed a course, and I'm a graduate level course, and I'm interdisciplinary with the climate school at Columbia and the School of the Arts. And we're just gonna really get into it and really reimagine the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Super excited about that, Lydia. How did that come to be? Is this just an evolution of you, saying, well, here's a gap and how do I fill it? And here's a university that's, can help me get there? Or did they come to you? How did that work?
No, I was thinking about it because in our climate storytelling working group, we were all feeling like hungry for science. We needed more science. We need more education, more science, and we started to reach out and think about what the issues and climate themes were in the world. Is it the worldwide water crisis? Is it climate refugees and security? Is it women in climate? Is it we just started to sort of bring more expert information into our wheelhouse. And then I'm thinking like, this is what if we were building a pipeline of, content creators to tell climate stories, they need to be doing this too. This is what
Hmm.
they need. And so I pitched the idea. I picked the Columbia because of the climate school and the film and the top film school. And then they asked me to include the whole School of the Arts, which I'm thankful for now because I think that climate expression and storytelling is really exploding in visual art and to a certain extent theater, and film has a ways to go. But I think that this is our challenge. This is the reason to do it, is to bring it forward.
Hmm. And with the multidisciplinary perspective, I mean, that kind of creates a little more richness in the course, the curriculum, perspectives, everything.
Well, Zena, what I realized is that I wanted to sort of see like who's teaching climate storytelling. I started to do my own little, graph of who across the country who's teaching climate storytelling. And obviously nowhere in film, but it was everywhere else. Like,
Yeah.
it was in architecture, it was in narrative medicine, it was engineering, it was in English and history. And then I discovered eco-criticism in the humanities, which is a brilliant field for us and it's relatively new in the humanities, but it's a field that interrogates a culture's relationship to the natural world through their literature. And they're looking at world literature sort of pre-colonialism. There's a lot of eco-criticism focused on colonial violence and the extraction of resources. And so in my talks and I focus on a humanist at Yale who runs the Whitney's Humanities Center and from Nigeria and has written a lot about eco-criticism in Africa. When I gave a keynote at Emerson, I thought, well, surely somebody's teaching eco-criticism here. And sure enough, there's a professor teaching eco-criticism in the global South, and also all the same issues. So it's very interesting, and those stories are I spoke at a conference of university film professors last week, and I just told them, I said, there is just a wealth of buried treasure out there in terms of stories, and your students in the film departments are desperate for inspiration. So like, so this idea of interdisciplinary education, I realized it was all the collaborations were happening with other departments, and somehow the film department is left out.
I
Like,
know.
so, and then I realized, from this conference that the film departments actually, depending on whether a university, where the priority is in the university for it, may be embedded in other departments. Like it might be in journalism, it might be in communications, it might be and digital media, or it's, but even universities that have very strong environmental programs, I was finding that the film departments were siloed. So this is sort of my new campaign, is to help people sort of bridge those gaps and to also help other disciplines, you know, value the storytelling, and the platform that we have, and to support us in that respect. I think a lot of times we kind of fall, there's cinema, then there's popular culture. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times we get kind of, oh yeah, you're the popcorn gang. But we know the influence that we have, and it's kind of irresponsible not to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is another thing. A lot of the climate storytelling groups, you've probably heard this, right? They talk about um, in trying to sort of make the case for the power that we have. They like to talk about the designated driver example.
Yeah.
And it's usually like, it appeared in an episode of Cheers, and then the designated driver became this cultural phenomenon. Well, when I looked at that more closely, it didn't happen that simply. It was a very highly orchestrated campaign. And it was something that the studios agreed upon. And there were 160 television, companies executives that agreed to work on it. And they went into the writer's room, and what they embedded was, instead of don't drink and drive, the line was, the designated driver is the life of the party. And that was the campaign, and it happened between 1988 and 1994. Can you imagine how many conversations are happening across these studios, executives, and writers' room in terms of how to push this idea forward? And by 1994, the alcohol-related fatalities on highways were reduced by 30%.
Yeah.
But I mention it because people are always like, well, we don't want to tell the writers what to write, and we don't want to get sort of tread into the creative territory. And I think that's why they're saying filmmakers need to come to them with the stories. But we have the power, to do it. And we've done it before, and we saved lives, and there's a hell of a lot of lives to save in the climate crisis.
Yeah.
So so
And
I think it's important to tell the whole story.
I think so too. And this is just, just merely hearing you say tell the whole story. It makes me think about everything from documentary filmmakers zooming in on that really cool animal, but neglecting to show the landscape, which it where it's standing, and it's like, it could be like, a forest burned down and a beautiful animal standing there, and all we see is the beauty of the animal, but we don't see the entire context. Like that kind of thing, where it's like, if we incorporate more of a holistic view to all of this, it's just that much richer. And what I've been grappling with ever since, this kind of concept of climate storytelling came onto the scene or got popular, a few years ago, is that it always seemed to me to be very almost superficial, if you will. Like, we show a thing on screen, or we say, yay, I like to drive my hybrid car, or whatever the thing is in your face. But what I love learning about from you, or how you were talking about this, is that it's much more complex and rich and deeper than there's much more to the climate storytelling story, if you will. And
Mhm.
when you start to pull back and look at all the complexities, it's really interesting and affects us in ways we don't even realize.
But
Mhm.
that's also one of the challenges we have. Like have a designated driver is a very cut and dry. It's very simple. Get behind it. Um, we know how to deal with it. I think one of the challenges with climate is it is so complex, right? It touches everybody everywhere, all around planet, and we just don't really know how to address it in our day to day, right? How does someone who has to choose between feeding their family or putting fuel in their car or getting to work and getting by. I think those are some of the challenges that we have to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and I think that it's, we're also in a battle for imagination with the fossil fuel companies, which has not gone away, and it's gotten worse since COVID and the vaccine crisis and the climate denial, science denial. Um, it in the polarization that of our culture, that we're dealing with right now, it's very, very difficult because it's a some people, if they're not, if they don't have the courage to, to sort of just name it and call it, then become, then they withdraw. And I think that it's abstract. You can't see it. That's why always the carbon calculation was important for us on the sets, because we could actually show, and we have an eco calculator now with the clean energy versus fossil fuel energy, where you can put the numbers in and you can see it. That's the only way you really
Yeah.
know. You measure the emissions and you measure the cost, and then you can make your decisions. I think for people that's very tough, but actually tell me if you've had this experience or you've heard it, because we recently got an electric car,
Okay.
and my husband was saying that it was changing his behavior. And I thought, you mean because you're looking for chargers all the time? And he said, no, no, it's like when I'm driving, if I if I slow down, I get more miles
Mm-hmm.
on my battery charge. Or if I
Yeah.
turn the air conditioner off, I get more miles left on my battery charge. And
Yep.
he goes, it's making me think about my consumption in every aspect of my life. I thought
Yeah.
that was like an amazing thing. Are people saying that? Are you hearing that feedback?
Yeah, all the
Well,
time.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I completely understand where he's coming from because we got an electric car in 2019. And at first it was like, woohoo, this sucker's fast. But then, my husband's an engineer. He's, really into the data and analytics and all the stuff. And like we started looking at how we were driving, when we put the air conditioner on, when we put the heater on, how the miles were how the battery was reacting, like, regenerative braking. Do we want it on, maximum regenerative braking, or do we want to like, let it loose a little more? Like, how does that affect our driving? And this is all stuff you can like physically feel it when the regenerative braking. You can physically, like I mean, you can see your consumption. And this is all it's like this new world of driving, and it's interesting, and it's like, we've done some long road trips with, during COVID in the car, and thinking through like, okay, well, we're not going to turn the air conditioner on, you know, maximum or whatever, like we're not going to turn it on high, or we're going to set it at a certain level so that we can like conserve a bit to get to where we want to go with a certain number of miles in case we need to drive around looking for the charger. Things like that where it's it's just different things to think about, and it's
The
not hard
signals.
or
Yeah.
different. It's just, I mean, it's not hard. It's just a different thing. I'm sure like the same is true. I travel a bit. I rent a different car every time sometimes I do my best to get the EVs and whatnot, but every single car is different. And one time I got this car and I got the keys, I got in, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. This looks completely different than what I was used to. So it's, but I figured it out and I drove, and it's all, but it's kind of that moment of transition where you're like, gotta figure this one out. Where's the button?
Well, when it
Yeah.
when it comes to the power system side of things, when we started implementing these, we actually had to come up with a monitor that showed them exactly how many kilowatts their power was and how many kilowatt hours they had left and how long the timing was that they had left. And then it gets critical. Like, for example, if you're off grid and you know you won't have any more energy in your battery, right? You're shit out of luck. So the onus becomes the user versus someone else's job to fill up the fuel truck or someone else or to fill up the tank. And I think that was one of the big things in film, right? It was kind of like the idea of a diesel generator is fill it and forget it and walk away. Easy. Oh, it's not big enough? Let's get a bigger one. Fill it, walk away, turn it on, right? How many times we see light towers that are going in the middle of the day on the side of a highway that are going because they just fill it with gas and they turn it on, and then the next person comes around, fills it with more gas. So it's that reaction, and we started to see it when we started introducing power systems, volt stacks. And Zena and I talk about this all the time, but it was to see the user go from that doesn't work. I can't even turn it on anymore. Well, did you charge it? And then it's to the point where then we started to say, okay, well, how long can you power these lights and how long can you power this production? And they started to be planning it. And then, so it became this sort of give and take with planning, with responsibility, taking the ownership on themselves to understand, what, how long it's going to last and what they can power. So I think it's a similar reaction, but it takes time for people to learn that behavior.
Yeah.
But once they learn it, it becomes second nature. And I think
Yeah.
that's what you're saying. And it takes time. I think it's going to, I'm a little more hopeful. I think it'll happen in the next 10 years.
Oh, I think so too.
Or it's,
No, I
it's in our
really do.
lifetime. It's not, I don't think it's so far out.
Yeah.
But I do think,
Hopefully by 2030.
yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Like that's a big date.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're seeing it, and the innovators are out there, and they're, the consumer appetite is there.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, there's a gap somewhere, right?
Yeah.
There's still a
Well,
huge gap.
one of the things that I keep coming across when I kind of leave my film bubble and go out into the real world and look at the different areas of resilience or bringing renewable energy or different kind of infrastructure into communities is how deep the distrust of government is
Yeah.
in our country. And that's really one of the biggest problems, and that gets exploited, so that's why I go back to saying we're in this battle for imagination. It's a real battle, and it's with the fossil fuel companies that are controlling um, everything that's happening, and what
Yeah.
people think.
But interestingly, and I know we were both at the Hollywood Climate Summit recently, and we saw a great talk on all of these, messages of the fossil fuel industry over the last, many, many years. And one of the things I was thinking is, well, now that we know all this and the research has been done and we have seen how you've used, various tactics on the consumer, can we, as storytellers, as creatives, in the advertising space or wherever, use it back on them or flip it around and use some of those in a more positive way? And I'm wondering if you've seen any indication of that.
Well, I think that's what Adam McKay is trying to do with Yellow Dot Studios.
Okay,
He's using satire um, as a way to really, you know, kind of show, using their kind of commercial tone and style, but using satire to flip the script.
got it.
And he's, I think what he's doing is very successful. I think we just have to multiply it. We have to come at it in many more ways than just one angle. But I think that no, I think that that is the big question: is how do we deal with misinformation and disinformation? I mean, we're just head on into it with this current election, and it's the first time that I really remember it being waged so heavily on social media. So it'll be interesting to kind of see
Yeah,
what we can do. Yeah.
100%.
Mm.
Lydia, this has been an amazing conversation. So much good stuff here, and so Zena and I are, as part of this project in this podcast, we're looking to create a new playbook with like guiding principles, right, about sustainability and entertainment. Um,
Mhm.
if you had to, think about the first one or three guiding principles for this playbook, what would be on your list?
Collective continuance, which is an academic term. Sorry,
What does it
but
mean?
it's also something that I've used in my own work as a filmmaker. And I think I mentioned before, I work a lot internationally. I've made 7 movies in India and several movies in Africa, and I work a lot in Europe and America as well. But I find that, wherever I go, I adapt into with the community where we are. And I think I'm figuring out how we can bring sustainability in on many different levels, practically, education, conversation, is important, and to not to leave something behind that is a negative. So, um, I've done that, whether we plant trees or whether we actually go as far as we've gotten involved in biotech projects where with pollution issues. We were in India on one series, we were messaging wearing masks because the pollution, we were actually printing the air quality index on the call sheet every day because the pollution had gotten so
Wow.
at a certain point where if the crew was just breathing the air, it was like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes. So it was, we're doing a lot of work, but with the community in mind. It's not just the film production itself. And I think that, in generally, I'll say that I've started to really think about, I think about the concentric circles of my community. I start with who's in my house when I lay my head down on my pillow at night, and who are my neighbors on my block, and what conversations are we having all together. And then what about the schools and the workplaces, and then what we do for fun or our clubs or hobbies, and then what about the bigger world and policy and local governance and federal governance. And I think it's important to kind of start right under your nose, and then and everybody that's around you. And our block in Brooklyn, we have a Google group and we all talk to each other. There's 150 of us, and it's a way of taking care of each other,
Yeah.
that we can take care of each other that way. And I think we all have to think about community that way. So I like to look at the film set that way, to how I
Mhm.
care about every person that's a part of this experience, because if you've been on a film, you go through something together.
That's
It's
right.
you really are experiencing something pretty extreme together, and that's before you even get to the climate piece. So it's we have these opportunities, and we have to step up and have the conversation. And when you do that, you find out that there are more allies out there than you thought.
Yeah.
When you start thinking about that tipping point, you know,
Yeah.
you could get it going on. So I think that's my contribution to the playbook.
Awesome.
Collective continuance
Love
Yeah.
it.
and
Thank
and
you.
concentric communities or something
Thank
Yeah.
like
you for
that.
teaching us something about that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Well, we
Yeah.
really appreciate this conversation and your time coming on the podcast. And we will, you know, we'll be following you. We'll be watching what you're doing. I'm super excited to hear about your class at Columbia.
Yeah, can
Oh.
we audit it
Yeah.
somehow?
Well, it's complicated,
All
but
right.
I'll be writing about it for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just amazing, right?
Sobering but hopeful, and
Just
yeah, playing all the parts with class and grace. And I don't know, there's something special about Lydia and her work.
Yeah, and just, she's been in the industry a long time. She's worn a lot of different hats. She knows how to navigate the industry. And I love that she, saw a gap and then did something to fill it.
Mhm.
And with this new course that sounds
Yeah,
amazing, and we have to figure out how to take it.
exactly. Gonna
I don't know.
join Columbia.
I know. How do you do that? Like, can you just walk into a lecture hall these days? I don't even know.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So more on that. If we
Yeah.
can figure out how to get some details on that as she goes through it, we'd love to hear her feedback, what she thought. So maybe we'll have her back after this
Oh
fall
yeah,
semester after she taught it.
absolutely. Maybe
So
she's going to give us a Coles Notes version of the course. But
yeah,
and I think just overall, it still reminds us that we've got a long road ahead. However, we are making progress, but we do have to start to change that narrative, both in front and behind the camera, and tell those stories. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to tell those stories. and not from a political perspective, right? I mean, how do we depoliticize this? It constantly gets wrapped up in this political bipartisan, but the reality is we're all on this planet together, hurling
Woo.
through space, right? And we are affected all collectively.
Collectively, what did she say? Collective continuance. That's a new
Yeah.
term for me,
Yeah, me
and I'm
too.
so glad she defined it for us. So let's keep an eye out for that one.
Hey, listeners. If you have a story about innovation and sustainability in entertainment, please get in touch with us at tieinpodcast@gmail.com. That's TIEIN podcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. We may ask you to be a guest on the show.
If you like today's conversation and want to hear more, please like us and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.